This next talk, I love the title for it. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Alan Kay, a pioneer computer scientist, who said, "The best way to predict the future is to invent it." Our next speakers, Fabienne Doerig and Lilith Brockhaus, will share their approach to owning your future. They'll be sharing learnings from failures and pivots to promoting and acquiring a winning mindset. And with that, I'd like to welcome Fabienne and Lilith to the stage.
Hi, everyone. I'm coming in first, so I'm Lilith. Happy to see some familiar faces also in the audience. I'm the co-founder of VisualMakers, and we build digital products, actually, with no and low code, and try to bring innovation closer to people, make it more approachable. And I let you in on a little secret. I didn't start in tech at all. I actually studied music and theater and kind of stumbled into the startup world a few years ago, and no-code was my way into tech. And so I kind of had to find a way always to make things work, to approach like how can I do things, how to kind of find out to make things work. So that's kind of shaped my approach to innovation and how to own a winning mindset. So now we're working with many companies from small to big, bringing that mindset in their teams as well. And today I'm accompanied by a person who has a really, truly unique perspective on the topic of a winning mindset, maybe from a kind of from a perspective where you don't necessarily would look first to someone who would implement a winning mindset. I'm talking about Fabienne Doerig. She's already being announced and joining me soon on stage. And she has a rich background in finance, which is traditionally not the first department where you would look for innovation. But she managed to bring innovation and the winning mindset in several teams that she worked with, bringing automation in the companies. And I'm really happy to discuss today how to bring a winning mindset into these companies with Fabienne. Please give a round of applause for Fabienne. Welcome.
Thank you, Lilith.
All right, let's sit down. All right, so I introduced you already a little bit, like what is your background? Do you want to take us on a road, like what you are doing right now? What is your role right now?
Yes, right now I'm helping entrepreneurs to scale. So we're looking at different go-to-market ideas or automation. Basically, when they struggle, I come in and help them scale, and hopefully they can benefit a little bit from the experience and also some of the mistakes I've made in the past.
And how did you come into the whole topic of automation? How did you approach that?
I think I stumbled into it a little bit. It was never really my plan, but I think there were probably two reasons. One is definitely my personality. So I like change. I like changing things, and I like making things better. So I just did it. And I think the other reason was that I always was in environments which went through significant changes, mainly growth stages. But it started out when I started out and did my CPA, I was at the Big Four, not really a company where you would think innovation is on top of mind. But I started in a team where we didn't really have a team, and we also didn't really have a product. So we were basically starting from zero. And that's where I also learned how to actually innovate and how to automate, because you don't want to do everything on your own and work day and night. So you have to be a little bit creative.
That's totally true. So coming from that kind of point zero, if you like to say, like how do you, or what is a winning mindset anyway, from your perspective?
From my perspective, it's definitely seeing the glass half full. So I think, when there is a challenge, just tackle it and try to go forward with it, and also not being afraid of failure. And that teaches you a lot of resilience. And I think, this not being afraid of failure, it's something that you can learn. I think I definitely learned that. I didn't have that from the beginning. And I think we need more of it, especially in these turbulent times.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would add maybe also the thought of like, how can we make this work, rather than like, okay, this is my department here. Here's where my what I have to work for kind of ends. But like, okay, what is it to think like in a team? Like, what is our goal and how do we make this work? Rather than like, okay, this doesn't work that way we approached before, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's also a lot about collaboration.
Yeah.
And liking to work in a team and with people.
Yeah. And how do you in your experience when you started with that team, like how did you approach that whole topic of automation? Was it a new topic for the team as well?
I think I approached the topic differently, and also in the beginning I wasn't really aware that I was automating. I just tried to make the process better, and maybe also with tools that weren't used before. And then it's a learning experience. I also tried to automate or implement systems and technology which didn't really go very well, but I think we come to that a bit later. So what really works is that you take the change management that you need to do seriously. And interestingly enough, I just had a chat with Andreas that you heard before in the morning, who actually is living the greenfield approach. I more did the brownfield approach, which means something's already there. So you have to work with what you have. And I think, I learned through different automation projects how you actually can be successful and how you can actually drive change within an organization.
Yeah. What I find super interesting from your perspective, especially coming from finance, and usually we find these automation projects, or where they start is usually in product or in IT or in ops maybe, but not necessarily in finance. So what is your perspective on innovation? Like, what does innovation mean for you from that perspective?
I think it has to do also with how you understand the role of a CFO. To me, it's not just a bean counter. It's actually a business partner who partners with the different stakeholders to make the business better and bring it forward. And I think also personally, driving automation for me was also in many areas a reason to cut costs, because you need to be more efficient. And the more pressure you have, sometimes also that's when you innovate the most.
Innovation happens in dark times.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah. And kind of how do you approach, especially coming from a brownfield where you already have lots of tools and processes in place, a little bit of the mindset like, okay, we have always done it this way. It's probably pretty hard to bring in change and to foster that winning mindset into the whole team, right? So who do you choose, or how do you embrace kind of that change? Where do you start?
Yes, it can be hard, and also sometimes personally I made it hard because I didn't really understand that not many people really are looking for change. The human beings, usually they want to stay in their comfort zone, they want to do the same routines that they know, and inside we all have the fear of the unknown. And I think once you learn to understand that, it becomes easier to drive change. And there's a good little story that is called Who Moved My Cheese? You can check it out on YouTube. But basically what the story is all about is that there are two mice and two little men who are looking for cheese in a labyrinth or in a maze, and the cheese is always at the same place. But one day it's not there anymore. Then the two mice, they start with trial and error, they find the cheese again. They didn't really think about it too much. And then there were the two little men. The two little men were very smart. They had our brains. So what they did first they were upset. They were like complaining that why they deserve it and why is it not here anymore and so on and so forth. But one of them started to think about okay, maybe I have to do something differently. And he went and looked for a cheese elsewhere, and eventually he found it. The other one stayed there and complained, and we still don't know whether he had moved today. So my point is, take the mices, go with the people that want to do something new, that are interested, that are motivated, and leave the others alone. And sometimes these are only very few, and sometimes you bring many people behind you, but it's not always that easy. And in terms of also what was said in the morning, it helps when things, tools, applications like Make look pretty. It helps. That was one of the reasons why I personally also started trying out with Make. So that definitely also helps.
Yes.
Then you don't have to convince them to use another tool that is maybe cumbersome, because it takes time and it takes effort to change the way people work. And not everyone embraces that in the beginning. Some do with time, but others never do, and that's okay.
Yes, I totally agree. So we always see that also in companies working with tools that might look not as nice, but as Make, by example, look, they have to be exciting, or they have to be fun to use. So that's something that is heavily underrated, I think, and probably in times of AI and so on, interfaces become even more important to be easily to use. Maybe coming back to the story of the mice and the cheese, there's also a really nice saying in Kim Scott's book Radical Candor. It's a little bit of a different topic, but she describes like rock stars and shooting stars, and kind of the shooting stars. You need both in a team, but shooting stars are kind of always looking for new ways how to make processes better, how to optimize, and really embracing change and running all around. I myself, I'm also a really enthusiastic person, and I get really easily excited, but then I get excited, and then I get bored pretty soon as well. So I need also someone as a rock star, kind of, who does things kind of more continuously, and also ask questions much more like, should we really do that? So you need both people in the team, but yeah, driving change always asks for the shooting stars to start with.
Yeah, I agree. And in finance, we work with rock stars because you can't afford mistakes in your day-to-day operations. So it's really a different mindset, and that doesn't come from one day to another.
Yeah. Maybe that's also something I'd like to ask you, like, especially in finance, where it's harder kind of to make mistakes, but every change and every innovation needs some sort of that you can fail, that you have the ability to fail, to lose the fear of even starting, right? How did you deal with that in your teams when you introduced into automation?
I really believe in pivoting and starting small, so you don't change the core operations, or you don't go into the day-to-day. So maybe you start in an adjacent area, or you start where someone has a good idea, and then you slowly but surely you bring it back to the core processes.
And can you talk about kind of a story where something like that happened, kind of where you needed to pivot, or where you kind of failed with a project in how do you call these marks? You know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Yes, I can. And I think one of the projects that we tackled was in the times where money was easily available and where there was super fast growth. We needed to do a lot to achieve our vision. And especially within finance, we had just grown significantly, and we were growing mainly by acquisitions. So we bought a lot of SMEs. We were a startup, so we did have the startup and the change culture, but we bought a lot of SMEs, and then we did implement an ERP system. And personally, I had a very hard time in the beginning to understand why finance people, which are all within a similar mindset, which is my culture where I come from, why they didn't really want to make it better or to actually implement an ERP where there was so much resistance. And then it wasn't really successful. So we wanted to do too many things at the same time, and we wanted to have it perfect from the very beginning. It was a huge project, and anyway, these projects always take longer, cost more, and so on. And then we decided to take a step back and to look at it again, and basically to restart and started it smaller, and also to bring people along more. And I think what I changed in my approach is I tried to understand better, so listened much more, went to the countries and saw, hey, what's actually their problem? And then I saw for how they work, an ERP doesn't really change much from an output perspective, but it totally changes the way you work on a day-to-day basis. And I can understand now that that's not something that you really want to go to for when you don't really have an output, because you don't need a consolidation. That's mainly something that the group or the top management needs. So I think, we changed two different approaches. The first one was a little bit, I would say, top-down, which didn't work very well. And the second one was with more involvement, doing more than just asking for the needs and what should the end result look like.
Yeah. And is that also the recipe for making that change last?
Yes, I think for making a change last, you need to bring people along. And I believe that you need to start slow, if you can afford it, and also in different areas of the organization, which is easier when you implement a tool which you can use organizational-wide. So I think when we implemented Make, we did it completely differently. So basically, we went use case shopping, so to say. So we went into different parts of the organization and really tried to understand the processes and where are actually the pain points. Where can we find champions that really are driving this automation from inside out, and that we can then also showcase in town halls, videos on Slack channels, etc., who then became automation champions. And I think one of the very big success factors is you need buy-in from the top, you need management buy-in. It's not enough if you are one person within the management team who actually lives that and tries to push that forward. You need your colleagues to come along. That's why personally I always make the tools that we implement pitch in front of management to explain what's in it for them, so they hear it from someone else, not only from inside out. I think that helps as well. Then you drive the change from the top and you drive it from the bottom. And you, of course, always need to focus on a specific use case, that you know what do you want to achieve, what's better afterwards.
Yeah. And also that the people know a kind of what can it do for me? Like, how does it change my daily business? How does it make things easier, and so on?
Exactly. And then when you need less time to work on something which is repetitive, that you can actually work on tasks which maybe you never had time before, or you don't have to work that much anymore, or you can try out new exciting projects.
Agreed. And would you say there was a turning point, especially in the story with the ERP that you mentioned earlier, like where you said, like, okay, now we are in a way that it's successful, or was it more like a process?
I don't think there was a specific turning point. I think it was a process, but maybe there was one or the things that initiated the process was probably my own frustration. And I think I believe that you always have to look at yourself first. So I questioned, like, what did I do wrong? What can I do differently? And where did I also underestimate the challenge? Yeah. And I started to learn more about how do you drive transformations? How do you drive change? How do you bring people along? And I would say not really a turning point, but a process which is constantly ongoing.
Yes, and it also is kind of a muscle, right? Like this muscle to have a winning mindset, to be open to change, because we still are, we like to do things the same. We get used to things and processes and so on, and like to be comfortable in what we're doing. And I think it's kind of a muscle to train also in a team, to be constantly asking yourself, okay, how can I make this better? How can I optimize? And how can I change maybe things with a new approach? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And with the workforce changing so much, with all this AI tools that are around, I understand that there is uncertainty and that you need to figure it out somehow. And I think a good team approach, a good collaboration definitely helps.
Yeah. And if you would start all over again, or if you would have to give tips kind of to someone who wants to start, like what would be your top 3 tips to start with?
So I think, first of all, start small and try to have an impact. So start somewhere small where you can see, hey, here I can solve a pain point, or I can save costs, or I can help getting more customers faster. And then also, don't underestimate the processes. Having a new tool is exciting, but it doesn't really help if you don't look at the processes and how does it connect to the area around it. And then maybe last but not least, don't underestimate change. It takes time, and it takes a lot of resilience, but it's definitely worth it. Personally, I find it very motivating when you see how people are changing the rules without really realizing, or how they become automation champion. That has been one of the most rewarding experience also for me, when I saw people really changing the roles within my team or other teams, and that they were super happy about the job that they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and talking about the change management part, when we prepared this talk, you talked about the 70-20-10 principle. Can you explain that a bit more?
Yes, I can explain that a bit more. So 70%, the largest part, is change management. It's basically bringing people along to use the technology you're implementing, which is about 20%, and 10% is the deep tech engineering. So it's worth to focus on the 70%. And I think from personal experience, I focused more on the 20%. How can we have the best ERP implemented, or how can we actually have an automation tool implemented everywhere as fast as possible? And then everything went slower. And now I'm starting to focus, or I started to focus more on the 70%. How do you bring people along? How do you drive change?
Yeah.
Who do you take with you? And then, also encouraging people to just do it.
Yeah.
Also part of change.
Yeah, that's true. And also, what I find quite interesting, especially with tools like Make, that when you have a starting point and have kind of a successful example in one department, then it kind of spreads, and people kind of pick up themselves, like, what can this tool maybe, or this process can do for me, and how can I implement that change? And once you reach that point, it's kind of like the beginning of the hockey stick we talked about earlier, right? So getting these people along is probably the hardest part, to showcase, like, okay, what can it do for each single one of them?
Yeah, I would agree there. And I think sometimes change is not where you think it is. So when we implemented Make, I was surprised which use cases we automated first. It were pain points of people somewhere in the organization, mainly in operations, that A, I didn't know existed, and B, I didn't know were so painful for them. So they were really using a lot of hours to download files from one system and upload it into the other, for example. Or also data transfer were topics, and then automation champion developed in areas where I personally haven't seen the use cases for whatever reason, and that was totally okay.
Yeah, and how did you measure success? Did you do that anyhow on another side than probably margin or revenue?
So yes, we did measure success, because what can't be measured doesn't count. So we measured it in terms of cost savings in the beginning very much, but then later on people could define their own KPI as long as they fit into our KPI tree. So they needed to support either an increased number of customers or increase the employee NPS or things like that. But in the beginning, we started with cost-saving measurements.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And how did it look like in the end? I mean, there's not really an end to that, right? But when you said like, okay, wow, now we really implemented that as a base kind of technology for how our business ops works?
I don't think that there was the end or there is
Yeah.
ever an end. It's definitely a work in progress, and it totally is. But I think what we can say was successful that in one department, we started with a very small use case who gave us a couple of thousands of savings, so nothing really major. But the person that was driving it was like really wanting to become this automation champion. And I think it was amazing to see how much was automated within that department, who actually didn't look at processes or how tools connected very much beforehand. And he kind of created his own role. And I would say this was the biggest success that I have seen, or it meant much more to me than actually saving costs, because you could see that it's actually also continuing if you don't drive it from a central role so much.
Yeah, I can totally feel that. And how did you approach, like, there are several concepts of citizen development, right? So you have the concept of people being in the different departments as automation champions, or you have a center of excellence, kind of with the automation champions in one team and spreading out in the different departments. Like, did you have a concept for that, or did that evolve kind of by itself, like the automation champion you just talked about?
I would not call it a concept. It's more an idea, and it evolved also. So we started with a central team within our team where we had one automation champion, and I basically told him, hey, we're going to automate, we're going to implement Make, let's check out what can we do with it. And then we realized that we actually needed use cases, and that we wanted use cases from the business, because also being a little bit burned with this other experience, I really didn't want to do something top-down. So we went use case shopping, and this is how it evolved, how this automation champion evolved, because I really wanted to showcase it. And that's what we called it. And so it was kind of a natural involvement. I wouldn't really call it a concept.
Yeah.
We didn't spend a lot of time. We just did it somehow.
Yeah, well, and it worked, obviously. So, yeah. We have a little bit more time for questions, also from the audience. Do you have some questions at hand? Okay, maybe after lunch a little tiredness in the audience. So maybe I have another question. Like, if you could name like one. Oh, I see there's one question. Okay, sorry, it's really dark.
Does it work? Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
So you have been talking about training the muscle of the team. What are your strategies to train the muscle? Like, which input do you give to the team to train this innovation in the team?
Do you want to start
Go
first?
first.
I go first. Okay.
Muscle.
So for us, what's worked really well in working also with bigger teams was always asking questions. Like everything you do or everything you think of a concept is an expectation, right? Nothing is set, but everything is an expectation. And to ask kind of behind these how have we done it before and so on, that always helped people in these teams to ask these questions themselves and not say like, okay, I have this new tool, I'm really excited about that, and let's go with it without asking like, yeah, maybe, but what could be the pitfalls, right? Or if we have a process and let's say a typical Excel process, right? You have an Excel macro, you have that in a lot of companies, and there's a process behind it, by example, for accounting, right? And then asking like, is this really the right way to do that? Because an automated process, if it's a shitty process, it's still going to be a shitty process, even if it's automated, right? So for us, it worked always with asking a lot of questions. And that's kind of what trained that muscle. Would you add something?
Yes, I would add one point. I really believe in role modeling. So I think you need to show good leadership, you need to go ahead as a role model, and you need to try it out yourself also, even if it's within a really small task. That's, I think, one of the easiest ways to bring people along and also to be excited about it and to have fun with it and not taking things too seriously. Sometimes just really live this trial and error approach, and I think you can do that everywhere. I also automated my first process with Make myself and got criticized by my team how actually not very well I did it. So things like that, it's really simple. It's in the day-to-day, you're bringing it in weeklies and so on. So this role modeling approach, in my eyes, is really important for everything that you want to achieve within the organization.
Yeah. Totally agree, and maybe one thing I would add even to that is making it easy to change, right? Even if you have like a little automation, or you start with mapping out a process on a Miro board, by example, right? It's really easy to change stuff there rather than to have it like you have several screens outlined in a in a Figma wireframe or so, where it takes much more work to change stuff. So start really, really small to make it easy to iterate and to change.
Thank you.
I think we have time for another question.
Please ask a question, otherwise Lilith is going to ask.
Here we go.
Hi there. Can you talk a little bit more about the use case shopping? Like what kind of criteria you'd go about to evaluate what's worthy of purchasing a use case?
Yes, I can. Also, it was in the beginning was a little bit freestyle, to be honest. We were basically doing a roadshow, visiting all the different locations, and it was about understanding the operational processes and where really the pain points are. And then I realized a lot of these pain points can be automated with Make. So I basically just promoted the tool, the application, and saw what was coming back. So this is what was how we started. And then we had this automation role within our team, who then had monthly calls about things that were happening in our organization, which was the COO organization. And then he always asked for follow-ups or for use cases. So, and we had a Slack channel and things like that. So we tried to include it in the day-to-day work, not to have another thing that you have to do. So it evolved kind of naturally. And then we also helped calculate the use cases. So we did it centrally because I made a commitment to my colleagues in the management team that we would basically save costs with it. So, and then that helped for the buy-in on the top. And then we just started implementing. And once you have the first use case, let's say we had one use case within HR, then they calculated their own use cases, they implemented it, and we were really not involved anymore.
And did people immediately understand what the automation potential of a use case was when you first showed Make?
No, they didn't, but neither did we. So I don't think that mattered too much. So I think starting small sometimes can mean a lot. In the end, of course, the ideal is to have it the whole end-to-end process automated. That was my vision when I tried to implement Make, but then I was like, okay, well, hold on a minute. I have to bring together so many people. It's going to take longer. Why don't I start small? Because we already have the tool. And this is how it evolved, yeah.
There was another question over here, yeah.
Hey, I found super interesting this comparison to 70-21%, how you split like the focus. And I was thinking like, from your experience, what differentiate like a team, if you depict this 70%, like what differentiate teams whose success in this 70% from those who doesn't? That's the first question. And the second one, how do you feel is the transition from the 70% when the team change and the culture towards the technology adoption? Like, how do you feel about this phase?
Not sure whether it changes, because you're always continually adapting and continually implementing something new. But I think in order to be successful with change management, I think it really needs someone that defends it and that lives it, and that actually also defends it against negativity, criticism, and so on, and someone resilient, and a resilient team that actually drive it forward. And you need to create ripple effects. And the more ripple effects you can create, the bigger the wave is. I think it depends. I don't think there is one approach which makes it right. I think it also depends a little bit on the culture that you have within the company, the team, etc. So in the company I worked, I was in a group function. We had a lot of countries. They were on the customer sides more. So I felt, and I think it was a bit the case, that I always had to prove or to justify why are we existing as a group function, because we were only costing, so to say, and we did what is the added value. So it was really important to me to actually also stand there and to be seen that we bring in new tools, that we try to make things better, and that we not just come there and say, hey, okay, now we are harmonizing process X, Y, Z, and no one really asked for it. I think, for me personally, I think I have this service mindset. So you always have a customer, and that's the most important thing, whether it's an external customer that you sell your product to, or whether it's an internal customer. And that is basically, I think, how I live it. So try to, what's in it for them, what's the value, how do we sell it, and how do we bring people along? And I want to come back to my point before. I think it's about the role modeling. And just to take one example from what I think worked well within my team, we had this automation champion who was just an excellent communicator. He loved new technologies. He also was really good in listening to people, what were their pain points. And I think a lot of also was due to what he drove within the organization, and it kind of was also a ripple effect, because people loved to work with him.
I have time for one more question, a short one, probably. Oh, if that's going to be a short one, I'm not sure.
Wow. Yeah, so you mentioned this automation champion. I like this idea. Shouldn't be this individual part of a Scrum team? So every organization has like certain team structures. Shouldn't you focus on establishing this role within every of these teams?
It depends on the organization, in my view, but shouldn't this automation champion be everywhere? Shouldn't everyone be an automation champion and an innovator in the ideal world, in my view? But not everyone is. So I think, personally, I believe I don't care where they are. Whoever is an automation champion and innovator, I will take them and try to actually make the organization better and to improve processes, to automate, become more efficient. That's a little bit how I see it. I really don't care where they are.
I think these are nice, really nice words to close the session with. And we thought, like, words, music probably speaks louder than words. So to wrap the whole thing up, we brought a little surprise for you. I hope you like it, and thank you so much for your time.